You've done a bunch of like media.
We've done a lot of media stuff. Yeah, I mean, people are just fascinated, I think. There's sort of like this, like, I mean, obviously we're sort of the only one in the area, so there's part of that, but I think there's just this general fascination with like the non-alc space and drinking and, you know, stuff like that. So
when it comes to traditional media, like news outlets, like what's their angle of approach or like their biggest question, I would say, to you?
yeah, I mean, traditional news media, I have plenty to say on traditional news media. I mean, I think they're all kind of like very monotone and they hear something somewhere and then they all feel like they have to do a story about it. So it's all, there's not much creative,
Not much
inventive
there.
angles, but
Yeah.
but it's, I think in general there's a broad theme of like wellness, which is sort of, I think is really interesting, sort of bubbled into like media at large, and like in a way that like you're too young to have experienced, but like when I was growing up as a kid, like there was nobody talking about like that wasn't a concept. There's like weirdos who like went to the gym and did these weird like 1980s style like aerobics, but it was almost sort of like that was like a weird slice of society that was like into fitness. And then now you fast forward, it's like topic du jour. Everything is somehow wellness oriented, and health is like a bigger. So there's kind of that big umbrella, and then I think they like to like jump into these stories where it's like, oh, here's a specific, you know, theme underneath that umbrella, the non-alc space, and the headlines keep pouring out about the people are not drinking and all that. And then there's, I think, the local business angle, which are, you know, these news organizations always love, like, okay, there's somewhere I can go film, like we have a tangible store they can come film in, like I can come there and talk about it. So I don't know, it's a lot of different interesting points of. Are we taping? Are we rolling?
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay,
now.
great. Yeah, there we go.
It's
Yeah,
good to just
you
get
captured all. Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, so all of the above. I mean, but I think that there's this big wellness piece that I think kind of hovers over all of it, which I think is amazing and really cool and great that we're all thinking about that. And I think it's sort of funny to me because I always tell people, you know, and this connects into the creator world, is like a big driver is the alternative media, right? Which is like outside of traditional media. Part of the reason people drank for so long in the way that they did was they had a lot of misinformation about the effects of alcohol, and a lot of that was channeled through traditional media, and you know, we all kind of at this point,
it's a bidding war. It's not
totally
about what is the right decision for you. It's about who's going to spend the most money.
Right, and it's people, you know, funded studies. You know, we've all seen these studies about the health effects of alcohol, and 2 drinks a day is fine, and all that kind of thing. And I mean, the biggest analogy is obviously the smoking world, and I think everybody sort of saw that story play out of how marketing played a big role in sort of hiding the impacts of that. And you know, people would sort of fabricate information, celebrities were used to advertise, et cetera, et cetera. And in a lesser way, I think that's happening in alcohol. It's not maybe as extreme as that, but there's a lot of the same elements of that story happening here.
Do you think that we could see a point down the line where it's almost what you mentioned of, it used to be kind of weird to be that health and wellness person at the, like, you know, having that certain lifestyle? Could that flip around where it's almost weird not to be into that?
Yeah, I think 100%. I mean, I think that's definitely where it's going. And again, I think there's different pockets of analogies I always look to of stuff like this that's happened before. Because I think with alcohol, people have this, it does play a special role, and it's a unique story, and there's nothing like it in the sense that it's such a part of our culture and fabric, social experiences. It's food and beverage, so it's tied into all these experiences. It's everywhere. And there's sort of mixed messages about health impacts. But if you look at other analogies, like, you know, smoking is one, for example, where you want to talk about a rapid change. It doesn't feel rapid, but like if you and I were doing this interview back in 1980, we'd both be smoking right now. I'd offer you a cigarette. There'd be an ashtray right here. Like that would be completely normal and encouraged and thought of as like, that's mainstream. Today, if we did that, like we both think we were insane and somebody'd be arrested. I mean, it's like, it's so wild, the turnaround that we've seen there. And again, multiple decades and lots of steps that have been through. But that's, you look at that, and then I look at something like, on a simpler level, like veganism or like plant-based eating, stuff like that, where, again, if you were, maybe call it even the 90s, right? If you were the vegan, like you went to a restaurant, you asked for a vegan option, you were the odd man out. People like, you know, the chef would come up with some crappy pasta, you know, thing. Fast forward to today, right? And every top restaurant knows they have to compete with like vegan options because there's a huge segment of the world that understands that plant-based eating is actually a pretty good choice. And so maybe that's not purely the mainstream yet, but it's they're in the conversation in a way that they didn't used to be. And so I think all those things kind of add up to these analogies of like, where is alcohol moving? And we're right in the middle of that, I think.
Yeah, and how do you think what dictates those trends like over time? You mentioned, and a lot of these I think are probably people waking up and realizing, like a small group of people waking up and realizing one thing, like this is bad for you. And then them being pioneers in a space, whether it's, and there's certain things like probably veganism that could be very subjective on bad for you or good for you because protein or whatever, right? But like, most people that do it probably do it because they believe that they're eating healthier by eating that way. Like what dictates that change though? And how does that happen over time? You mentioned over decades and in different, industries.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, these things take a long time in part because there's sort of a cultural starting point and a sort of a mental space starting point for how people think about things. And it's sort of funny because with alcohol, I always give people this test of like, you only think about alcohol in the way you do because of the starting point today. If I were to take a clean sheet of paper out and write down all the attributes of alcohol, good and bad, and say, should we legalize this? Should we serve this all the time? And not tell you what it was. I mean, no one would say yes. There's no one would jump for that, right? Truly. I mean, if you were being honest about it, right? And so there's this starting point that you sort of have to deal with and reckon with. And I guess the way I think about it is like there's one piece of it, which we touched on already, is this information side and just the honest truth about the health impacts of alcohol. And I agree with you. I think the debate's still open in terms of food and veganism and things like that. I think one thing that's not up for debate is that alcohol is fundamentally bad for your body, right? So the actual portion of the drink that's alcohol, it's bad for you, right? And there's now no disputing that. But that's pretty recent that I think people are really coming to grips with that. And it doesn't mean people won't do it. Like people do lots of things that are not so great for them. But just having that basis of information is really, really recent. And I think that comes from, again, sort of disintermediating, all the channels of bad information like marketing and studies and stuff funded by some of the bigger alcohol companies and lobbies and things like that. It comes from like, the creator world and the social media world, I think is this hugely powerful channel for delivering real science and information. So you've got, folks like the Andrew Hubermans and the health world of folks who they're basically saying like, look, I've read the studies, I'm a scientist, I'm talking to you directly, unfiltered, and I'm telling you it's bad. And so those types of things add up, and then they get re-forwarded, and other people who are maybe not the scientists, but they're influencer types pick that up, and it starts to snowball into this conversation. And so that's like the power of like the social media world. It's just incredible channels for spreading that stuff in a really direct, honest way. So then you've got sort of the information's there, and then it becomes, okay, well, if we know that and people want to change, how does that change actually start rippling through? And that's where it becomes, I kind of call it like hand-to-hand combat. It's a daily thing, right? It's like, you talk to people about stopping drinking, right? And it's like, you don't stop drinking. Like, what does that even mean? It means that each day, 10 times a day, when you decide to pick up a drink, you don't make it an alcoholic drink. Like, it's like that tactical. It's a daily choice. And so that's where, companies like Dray come in and others, but like making it, easy to make that choice, making it socially acceptable to be the person not drinking, having drink alternatives that you could actually go to and feel comfortable with. But it's all those like little minute things that start to add up. And then the conversation, I think, starts to shift. And all of a sudden it's like, at least as what I'm seeing is the younger generations who are first getting to drinking age, they're all of a sudden empowered with all the information before they even ever picked up an alcoholic drink. So they're making like these intentional choices to start with. And a lot of them are saying, why would I start doing that? And so it's this almost like small choices that then ripple into generational impacts, and that sort of plays out over time. So, I mean, I see it happening, very much, but it is that it does take those like day-to-day habit changes and people sort of empowering them. I like to think Dray's a big part of that. But again, we're one tiny voice in even just a town like Boston, let alone, the bigger community to kind of make that happen.
Yeah, Boston is probably no easy feat when it
Right,
comes
yeah.
to this.
We drink heavily.
For sure.
Somebody, there's a comedian who jokes like every city he visits on his comedic tour is like they're proud of how much they drink. Every town thinks they're like the
Probably
biggest
doesn't even come
drinkers, right?
close.
And the Midwest or Boston, New York, everybody thinks they're drinking the most. And Boston's, I think just by the numbers, it's pretty heavy. Of course, there's big student populations and obviously younger people who go out and drink, and there's a deep, long history with Boston. To me, the other interesting thing about Boston is that we're this amazing, innovative town, but we do sit outside the sort of cultural epicenters of New York and LA, which kind of dictate a lot of these like wellness and particular trends. Like we're kind of like outside of that bubble. So there's more convincing, there's more, I hate to say behind because I don't think we're necessarily behind, but I think we're outside of that, epicenter of activity in the health and wellness space. And so there's just more education that I think has to go on and sort of more of that hand-to-hand combat that, we try to do. Yeah.
Lots to unpack there.
Yeah.
First of all, Pat, welcome to the Creators Founders
Yeah.
podcast. That was
It's good to be
quite
here.
the
Yeah.
introduction and already getting into the conversation here. Let's rewind for you personally, because I think that was really great insight, and especially setting the tone and the scene of where we are currently, and also breaking down a little bit of like high level just trends when it comes to society with drinking or really anything. But for you personally, what's your journey been? And then, kind of take us back to the beginning throughout your career and everything. And then also for you, that point when you realized maybe these things that you just kind of touched on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. It's a cool group and organization. I've got to experience it in a bunch of ways now, and the creator founder group is just like, it's an amazing set of individuals. So it's great to be included. And frankly, like, whether we were on camera or not, I'd be talking your ear off about this, as you probably saw from already here. Anybody who's listening, like, I want to engage on these things because I'm like very passionate about it, and I think, we'll sort of get to it. But part of my life goal and purpose, I think, has shifted very much to supporting this big cultural change, helping people drink less, and sort of demonstrating that that's something that I think is going to happen and is a very positive thing for the world at large. So. I'm super into it. Dray's a pillar of that. I mean, I do other things in the space as well, but, Dray's been sort of my entry point into this amazing space of, we'll call it sobriety, soberishness, helping the world drink less. And yeah, I'm not the most obvious choice to open a retail store at all, let alone, a non-alcoholic concept. So rewinding in my career, I've been in business for a long time. I sort of came out of college and went right into strategy consulting with a big firm doing business consulting across a variety of types. But like a business advisor, shaping lots of different businesses, a lot of stuff on the financial side. And so then I spent the bulk of my career in investing, private equity investing. And that's an experience of kind of, putting money behind a company that already exists and, making some change, creating more profit, but, largely sitting on the investor side, sitting at the board level side. And so even before starting Dray, probably 15 plus years into my career, I decided, I wanted to change. I should say as well, I went to business school, so I have an MBA background. So while I was in investing, I have a more broad business background than that. But after being back after business school for a few years in private equity, I think a bunch of things happened, but I ultimately looked at it and said, I don't want to be sitting on this side anymore. I want to be on the founder side. So I saw all these amazing founders, businesses that were large at that point. They weren't little startups, but had real success. And it usually started with a founder who wanted to take that journey. And so that was, I looked at that and was like, these are the guys I want to be. And so I really started my founder journey. This is maybe back in 2018 now, so a number of years ago, left the private equity firm I was in. And at the time, it was a pretty wild choice because I was sort of at the point where I was, getting onto a partner track for a private equity firm, which can be a pretty big deal and sort of lock in a long term. I had my second child just recently, so I'm sort of in my mid 40s now, but this is, at the time I was, mid 30s, having my second kid, family formation, and my wife was thankfully very supportive, but was sort of like, wow, this is quite a transition. And I did that a lot because I really wanted to create my own destiny. You know, I was working for other people for a long time, saw these founders who had built something meaningful, and I was like, these are the guys that create change. These are the guys that own their own destiny, and sink or swim, that's where I want to be. And frankly, from a family life standpoint, it helped a lot because I could create my own destiny and be the kind of father and husband I wanted to be. So that's definitely part of the story too, and shouldn't be
On
missed.
the, like, level that you were at, like the private equity, like that whole industry, um, what was there any like signals in this space that were picked up over there, whether it was you personally or like was there a general sense at that level of investing, when it came to, and I mean, this is almost 10 years ago, like the non-alcoholic space. So I'm sure it's probably way different even now, but like back then, what was the overall like vibe or thought process like from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably different levels of that. I mean, I think the one maybe the most relevant was the internal culture of some of the places I was at, which and I won't name any names, but the cultures I was in generally were these like work hard, play hard cultures. Really starting very early in my career and even all the way through, where it was like people busted their ass, long hours, that type of thing. But there was a lot of like parties and events and taking people out, and particularly as a younger person, that culture where that was like that was your rewards. You guys go out and have a wild time and party and do that type of thing. Then it moved into more client or investor entertaining and entertaining founders that you wanted to invest in. And so it was the backdrop of all that is there's a bunch of alcohol involved, right? I mean, there's wine dinners, there's clubs, things like that, and I experienced all of that. And so it's funny when that's sort of the backdrop internally. I mean, it obviously colors how you then think about the market at large. And so I really didn't, I never heard anyone talking about the non-alcoholic space like at all. I never heard, I really didn't hear people talking about sobriety or soberishness or, I mean, wellness was kind of becoming a thing.
Soberishness?
Soberishness, right? So it's like this idea, it's a bigger topic to explore with like Dray, but like, so, and we hadn't gotten to this point in my journey yet. So I'm sober and I'm in recovery. So like I participate in like group recovery stuff and things like that. I've been sober for about 5 years now. And that's definitely that's one cool group of people that have made this choice, this life choice of like, I'm not drinking anymore. I think oftentimes people think that's a group of people who were forced into it. And I always like to tell people like, no, it's a group of people who chose to do it. Most of the people who didn't choose to do it are dead. And so that's the reality, right? So it's actually a really empowered group of people who made their life better by committing to not drinking, and other people have drugs and things like that. But and so that's kind of sobriety. Oftentimes it's labeled as like that group of people, and that's a cool group. But the reality is, I think the world has thought of this choice around drinking as very stark. It's very black or white. You're either sober, you're in that group, right? And you're part of the people that don't talk about it. It's anonymous. That's a big word that's used. You go to church basements for meetings, or you drink, and that's kind of it's this dichotomy of like there's nothing in between, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's how people have thought about it. I mean, certainly, I think how I thought about it probably for a very long time. And what I've seen is like that's not reality, right? I mean, and a lot of people today are thinking more on a spectrum of like maybe they do drink, but they're reducing their drinking. Maybe they're taking breaks. Maybe they're just sort of exploring like what's the relationship with
And
alcohol.
I feel like that can scare people off in a way where it makes
big
it
time.
intimidating.
Makes it very intimidating because it feels like an identity choice. It feels like you're choosing, if you're going to be the sober guy in recovery, like that's a very labeling thing, right? And I think people use all sorts of terms to describe that person, but all of them are kind of like you're being labeled as something. You're choosing an identity, and again, I think that's very, as you said, it's intimidating. It's a big hump to get over to say, okay, well, if I'm going to drink less, am I headed towards that, right? And I think that's just not. That's not the way it has to be. It's not the way it should be, and I think that's evolving to the point where people use lots of different terms for it, being dryish. People say being dryish. People say soberish, right? Which is kind of this idea of you're exploring, right? Maybe you do a dry January, right? And every year you take a month break and you decide, I'm just going to see how I feel. Take a month off and see how I feel. Maybe you're an athlete in season. Maybe you're there's a great guy that was at one of the creators events the other night, and he talked about how he and his friends do marathons and ultra marathons, and they go through these cycles of, if you're training for an ultra marathon, 100-mile race, like, I can news for you, no one who's doing that is drinking, right? And so they're incorporating it into this like sort of broader set of goals in life. And so, what do you call that person? Because maybe then a week later they have a beer
after the race or
and
something.
and
whatever.
they spend the next 6 months maybe having a couple drinks. And so there's all these words that kind of explore that interesting middle of it's not binary. Because I think that's when it gets into that labeling space, right? Then when you get into that day-to-day, that choice each time, and you're at an event at work and there's a bar there, all of a sudden you think of yourself as, well, am I the person that drinks or doesn't drink? And if you're the person that drinks, you're like, okay, well, I'll have a drink, right? And so it becomes this very automatic thing that's sort of based on identity. And I think that should shift. That doesn't need to be that way. And, it's very much how I think about like Dray, which is, only about 20% of our customers are people that truly don't drink permanently, like sober or whatever you want to call it. The rest have some alcohol in their lives, and it might be, they're incorporating non-alcoholic drinks for a night, or it might be a period of time. But yeah, it's this idea of
an event and they want to have options.
They want to have options and include people. There's lots of different ways people kind of incorporate this concept, but that's sort of the exploring this gray area with different words that kind of mean that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, I think a lot of it is kind of like you mentioned, you don't really think about it, right? You think, oh, as a default, if I go to an event for work and there's an open bar, oh yeah, like easy, right? Whereas it should be, or it's becoming more of a conscious choice of like, how do I actually feel right now? What's actually going to supplement and gear me up for the life and the lifestyle and the goals that I have, and what's the best choice for that, right?
100%. Yeah, and again, I think when I think in my younger days in work life, like you thought of this as the reward. The reward is, oh, there's this open bar, go drink as much as you want. And, and by the way, you had a bunch of people around you, of the same age who were it was this group think mentality. And so yes, it all became very automatic. And now, you kind of think about that. I mean, first of all, why is that a reward? I mean, I would argue it's not much of a reward if at all. But also does it have that ripple effect of like, what else do you want to do with your life? Do you, are you going for a long run the next morning? Do you have a big meeting the next day? Do you have some other project in your life you want to engage in?
I think it's even interesting, and speaking of Boston, obviously Boston based, but like you look at like a company like Whoop, right?
Yeah.
I think a big realization and again, that wouldn't be as big as they are without this shift in people caring about and taking seriously their health and wellness.
Yeah.
But you can see, and I think that's been such like a clear eye opener for people, where when you drink, your Whoop score, your sleep score, you don't have to input, oh, I drink alcohol. You can if you want, but
you see
it knows. Yeah. And that's like, for me, that was a massive indicator where I was like, and like personally, I would definitely fall under like the soberish, where it's just like, if I'm on a beach club in the south of France, I'm going to have a drink. But if I'm in Boston and it's 28 degrees out, there's just zero desire for me to in almost any situation. And yeah, I think it's like technology, society, social media, new media, and just narratives out there that are just kind of opening up the playing field in a way that, it's not as normal, or it's not as maybe pressured anymore. And there's just way more options. And especially now, having stores like this and cultivating like spaces, but also putting product out there in these communities, I feel like that's only going to support everything from a bigger
100%,
picture.
yeah. And I'll raise my hand and show my Whoop right now.
Let's go.
I'm not sure you saw that originally, but it's one of my, I only mentioned because it's like literally one of my favorite companies that's in Boston, and what they're doing with health information. And we didn't talk about it before, but part of information is, the media, the content you're receiving. Part of information is your own health data and your own experience, right? And some of that is, you could experience that yourself and kind of put it together in your head of like, I drank last night, I didn't sleep well, kind of But then things like a Whoop or, the other devices give you more of that. They empower you with that data to say like, oh, okay, this really is having an effect. And yeah, all that kind of adds up to they understand the information and they can sort of make an intentional choice for sure.
Definitely. Talk about Dray, and I would say like where you guys are in business, like the model. I know you have 2 stores, you have e-commerce. Just give me like an overview of like what that looks like for you guys.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Dray, we started in 2023. So I really formed the business early 2023, and then we opened our doors on our first store that we're sitting in right now in South End in November 23. So it's been 2.5 years, but in some ways, I also think it's like really early days for us. And we started with physical in-person retail, which maybe doesn't sound like the obvious choice of where to start a business these days with e-commerce and things like that, but to me, when I started the business, I saw a couple things. One was this is a food and beverage product that has to be tasted and experienced. So you almost need this like physical touch point and hub to really activate, this idea. Like get people to taste things, get people to come to events and experience stuff like in a social setting,
Also,
right?
I feel like
Yeah.
if you look at, again, kind of not comparing, but looking at how alcohol is purchased or like that transaction process, you have to replicate that or you have to meet that where it's at, because if you try to, innovate this whole new way of like finding product, it's just not going to work as quickly, I feel like.
Fully. Yeah, I mean, just like e-commerce, for example, where it's people are not used to buying their drinks for their Saturday night a week in advance on an e-commerce platform. And oh, by the way, they have to buy a large quantity to get the shipping costs low enough and, all that type of stuff. So you're exactly right. It's like, it's the way people buy these types of things, and we sort of have to fit in somewhere. Even then, I mean, it's so hard. Alcohol is literally everywhere. I mean, it's like, I always tell people like Dray is we're sitting here in the South End, so we got a retail environment. I mean, within literally 1 block of here, there's 8 places that sell alcohol. Like 1 block, like 8 places that sell alcohol.
As in like
As
restaurants
in
or
stores, restaurants. There's a grocery store. There's 2 retail establishments right nearby. There's 4 or 5 restaurants. I mean, it's like it's like everywhere. And I think that's one of the things when you step out of consuming alcohol, you start to see you're like, wow, this stuff is everywhere. And that's exactly part of the Dray story is we want to be in the middle of that. So we are planting our store like right in the middle of that environment and saying like, we're here too. And alcohol takes up enough space. We should have a dedicated space to non-alcoholic. And that's part of the story too, is the dedicated non-alcoholic space. So in our store, we sell beers, wines, spirits, ready-to-drink cocktails, all these alternatives, all non-alcoholic, right? So you can come in the store, nothing will affect your sobriety. Nothing, we don't actually have to ID people for things. It's a very pure environment in a lot of ways. And that's an important thing too, because traditionally, if these things were sold, locally, they're sold right next to alcohol or in the middle of alcohol, right?
or there's a store with 99% of products
well, that's
that are
what it is.
alcohol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right? If you go to, again, I won't name names. There's a grocery store, a little further away from here, a larger chain grocery store, where if you go to their non-alcoholic beer, it's in a beer section. It's literally in the middle, so it's surrounded on all 4 sides by alcoholic beers. And as you can see, I mean, these things look the same, right? And like, you could get mixed up, you could grab the wrong thing, and again, for some people that can matter actually a lot, right? And so traditionally, these products have not shined anywhere. They haven't, even if they are sold locally somewhere, they're kind of the afterthought, right? And so we wanted to create a physical space where they could shine, they could be the center stage product, and people could experience them frequently. So the physical retail was like a really important part of that, and that's done well. I mean, we use the space obviously for selling retail products, but for lots of events as well, because we think that's how people want to experience these products. They want community around it. They want to experience products as they would in a social setting, and so we use it for a lot more than just selling product. And as you can see from the store, in a lot of ways, we're trying to differentiate ourselves. Like, we are a bottle shop, but we look very different than your like corner liquor store, right? We're bright, we're open, we're vibrant, we're sort of inviting you in to the experience, as opposed to sort of this dingy kind of, dust on the shelves, jammed with product
It feels
space.
like boutique in here.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's sort of elevating the experience, making it fun and vibrant. we're also trying to make it not be so in your face about like sobriety and stuff like that, right? Like again, this is just, I think of it as just another cool consumer retail brand. It's the fact that, you know, we don't have alcohol. I mean, that's part of the story, but it's not this identity choice. Like the second you walk in the door, suddenly you've got to become sober, you know, stuff like that. So we wanted to make it sort of a standalone, great retail brand on its own. And we've done that, I think, pretty successfully. So we have 2 stores today. So we opened the second store a little over a year ago over in Cambridge. We've got 2 physical retail stores. We do have a small online presence. I mean, that's very selective in terms of what we do on there. And we have some interesting ways that we're going to roll out online that'll kind of support what we do, but not make it just basic e-commerce. And then we do a lot on the events side of things. I mean, we could run a whole catering and events business if we wanted to. Usually what we're doing is we're trying to showcase these products in events. We're not necessarily trying to like purely make money on the event. It's about getting the non-alcoholic product out into the wild. And then the last pillar is on the business to business side, where we're trying to do lots more with bars, restaurants, hospitality venues to shape their menus and get more of these products on the menu, get them on in a more interesting way, and just sort of support and promote those venues to kind of incorporate this stuff in a bigger way than they have already.
Yeah, you mentioned before this, you were talking about the Boston University Hospitality School, how you're involved there. What's like there, like with, you know, hospitality and bars, restaurant owners, or people in that industry, how are they like receiving this? Are they realizing this is something we need to take seriously now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the successful, you know, smart ones are for sure. I mean, we do a lot of work with the BU School of Hospitality. They're amazing folks over there, have some great relationships, and that, at least in Boston and frankly just nationally and internationally, it's an epicenter of innovation around hospitality. And you know, they're always looking for innovation. They're always looking for what's next. We talked a little bit about how, you know, things like veganism have played out in those environments, and I think at least the conversations within like a school like that, this space, the non-alcoholic stuff, is very much in the same vein. This is a big secular trend. People are drinking less. It needs to be incorporated into menus. And the way you're seeing that play out is that the most innovative places actually are doing it. So the funny thing right now is that, you know, if you go to your average corner restaurant, maybe they have one non-alcoholic beer on the menu. There's usually not much. And oftentimes, maybe not even that. They have, you know, some old, terrible, you know, mocktail. Well, I hate that word. I hate even saying it out loud. But, you know, the old combination of some soda and some fruit juices as like a $15 mocktail, like that kind of crap is out there. But if you go to like the Michelin-starred restaurants, the best restaurants in the world, the top restaurant programs in other markets and even some here, they all have amazing non-alcoholic menus and non-alcoholic pairings to go with their meals. And the reason for that primarily is it's about hospitality. It's not about them jamming their choices down your throat. It's about when you come in that door, responding to you as a customer and having what you want. And so lots of people aren't drinking anyway, so they're offering that. But it's inclusive, right? It's like whatever you're thinking about as a hospitality experience that day, they can deliver that. And so those restaurants are very much doing that, right?
Because they're so customer first.
They're so customer first and thinking about what are the trends out there that we need to respond to and deliver on the sort of hospitality experience. So, and I think that will trickle down eventually. So I always tell people, like, I think the bars and restaurants that will do well in this, they're going to see this as an opportunity to differentiate. And like today, differentiating literally means just having more interesting non-alcoholic options than the next guy, the guy that only has one beer, right? You have 4 or 5 non-alcoholic options on your menu that are well crafted. That's huge right now. And it's not a lot of work. And you see that as an opportunity where the customer that's going to buy that, right? Either there are customers that might not go to your establishment if they don't think you have decent non-alc options because they just don't want to drink and they don't want to like get into a space where they feel like they have to. But if those customers come, they're going to drink a soda water, a diet soda or something like that. Or you could sell them a cocktail with some margin on it and have them feel even better about the experience. So I think there's just so much opportunity in that the hospitality venues need to think more about it and like, how can they respond to something that's happening? Like they the ones that stick their head in the sands and sort of say, well, people go back to drinking, blah, blah, like that's that's not going to go anywhere, right? I mean, it's happening whether they like it or not.
Yeah. I think you kind of mentioned this earlier and we touched on this, but like social media playing such a massive impact when it comes to any trend and any type of um, innovation, I think, as a society. And, it's been a common theme throughout this conversation, but also just, I think is inevitable right now is health, wellness, these things now becoming cool and now becoming normal, which is crazy to say, but like, there's more and more opportunity, there's more and more narrative, there's more and more put out there in those fields. Um, I think just like, yeah, dive into like in your opinion, how social media and how these narratives and this new media has affected you, yourself, affected Dre, but also like this industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot in there. I mean, I think the interesting thing right now is that social media, there's an information engine component to it, which is, as we talked about, there's sort of health and wellness trends that are out there. So there are literally scientists out there who are going on there and sort of delivering to people an honest version of the data, that alcohol is bad for you. And so it sort of starts with that of like just the information getting out there and people passing that around. So there's sort of this nice information lens that can occur. That can go badly too, right? I mean, it's part of social media is you got to sort through what's true and what's not, and that's really hard. But at least it kind of gets out there. It's in a way that traditional media always had some inherent bias in it around
There's
marketing
someone
marketing dollars.
choosing or a group of people
Yeah,
choosing what
people
goes
were
out there. Yeah.
choosing, largely they were choosing based on who is spending marketing dollars. Like we kind of all know that story. And at least in a lot of social media, that's not happening, and yes, there's stuff to sort through, but it's getting out there. So I think there's sort of a content side of it. Then there's this sort of like cultural norms shifting that goes on. So you're seeing personalities who are big names. They could be, celebrities. They could be athletes. They could just be huge influencers, right? Which we're seeing these like people who are just influencers. That's their whole celebrity status, talking about their own habits and like what they do, right? And you're seeing like lots of fitness oriented ones, wellness oriented ones, very, very, very popular ones that are speaking very directly about like they don't drink, their friends don't drink, so they're sort of sharing their life and their practices in a way that people are sort of hearing and cluing into that, and following that. I mean, there's some pretty big names that have kind of, shown that they don't drink and are sober and stuff like that. So there's that side of it. And then there's the whole like almost like commercial side of it of like shopping investigation where, we see people that come to Dray, that come to the store, and they've already done all this research. Like they've been on social media and they're asking for the drink that they saw on social media in our store. And so you're sort of seeing this whole journey where there's information, they're exploring people's habits, and now they're like actually almost like pre-shopping. Like they're not showing up to the store like, what do you have? They're showing up to the store being like, I saw this thing on TikTok
Informed,
and
yeah,
like I want
yeah.
this drink. And so, all that's great. I think, I mean, obviously we don't always have what they want, but oftentimes, like if we don't have what they want, we take that as information and we're like, oh, there's some drink we haven't heard about. Let's go learn about it. Let's get in the store because that's probably going to be the next big thing. So I think the social media side of the world, it's been hugely helpful for Dre too, by the way, because it's gotten our name out there. We really haven't paid for any marketing, right? So we've gotten a lot of like free press locally, and then we've had a bunch of social media stuff and influencers who've supported us. We haven't really paid anybody yet. I'm sure we will at some point, but it's been a pretty amazing channel. I just think it's, it democratizes sort of everything, and, for a small business like us, it allows us to sort of get out there in a way that would be probably really hard under traditional media terms. So it's been massively helpful, and I think the wellness space at large is taking up more and more and more space in the social media world. People are just sort of looking to be empowered around how are they going to live more healthy, and they're sort of looking to that channel as like, what are the practices I should explore?
Yeah, and I think two things that like come to mind for me when you talk about like with what you just said is when it comes to trust, people people trust what they see online, and that's why when they come in here and they are looking for something, they're like, I saw this online, I trust this person, like I am gonna make my decision based on this video. And I think the other part of that is when it comes to everyone's creating and people are creating essentially on every side of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
what you're looking for is going to find you, because you're like the way it's set up and the way the technology and the algorithms work,
Yeah.
your algorithm is designed to fit your interests, right? And so if you're maybe looking for a solution of how can I be more healthy, you're gonna get hit from all sides of, here's a wellness event next, Thursday night. Here's a store in your neighborhood that sells non-alcoholic drinks that can maybe help fix some
Yeah.
habits or patterns in your life and overall, and lead to better health. And then here's an influencer reviewing a drink that you should go try, so it kind of, again, it's extremely complementary, and it's cool to hear that firsthand from you, a brick and mortar e-commerce, like small business owner, on how that's affected you. And also how, like, I think for some people that might be listening, or just like a narrative out there is that you have to pay influencers and it's extremely expensive. Like, it's good to know that that isn't the case. Like, there's ways around that, and sometimes not doing that is all. And like, there's a definitely a happy medium,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
there's
yeah. No, there's a spectrum, and I certainly don't mean to imply that creators shouldn't be paid for the amazing work they do, because I think they absolutely should. I mean, I'm constant, you've had events where, I mean, I'm just blown away by some of what some of these, particularly young people who just like created these things from scratch, where I'm just like, I couldn't even think about doing that at that age. And so I do think there's so much value. They need to get paid for that in different ways. But I do think that the nice thing about it is there's different levels of that, and there's sort of honest exchange that, like we'll just have, an influencer in, like we've had different events where we just have people in and we're just sort of like, just talk honestly about your experience. Like if you want to tag us, tag us. If you don't, you don't. If you had
exactly.
something you liked here, talk about it. If you had something you didn't like, talk about that
Yeah,
too. But it doesn't have to be this thing where I'm like, I'm giving you money and so you have to talk well about my store. Like I like the sort of honest exchange of, you had an experience here, how did it go? Tell people about it. And we have to deliver on, we're the ones responsible for making that a good experience, right? It's not just like you're getting paid to do it.
also,
So
I think like when we've talked to a lot of the creators that are involved in our community, they mention that they prefer to work with people. And a lot of times, if they like something, or if they like a brand, or they like a mission behind something, they're just going to post about it naturally, because they need to. Not everything that they do has to be a sponsored post, and that's actually going to be bad for their brand if everything is. So they need to kind of keep that level of trust, like at a certain level, and also like they enjoy that, and that's part of like their work. And the other thing I think is important to mention is like, how did they become creators? How did they, grow their following? There's essentially no difference between what they did and what a business could do, because again, it's democratized. All the tools are out there, and as a business, like it's pretty clear on what the narrative is. It's a little bit different. Maybe it's less personality, but we're seeing brands, we're seeing business owners who are building their own influence and distribution, doing it the same way as full-time creators and influencers are doing
100%. Yeah,
themselves.
we're having to become creators. I mean, it's like my wife and I, who are we're not the people you would pick to be creators first. So we've had to dabble in it and create our own. And we're going to do more of that. We need to do a better job of that. Like it's just part of the job, right? Is like jumping on. I was not somebody that was in social media like at all. Lots of opportunities over my life to like jump in at early stages, and I was always like, it's not for me. And now it's like, no, this is something we have to do. And as we've seen, like the stuff that does best for us is like when I'm talking, as a business owner to people, through social media. So we're doing more of that ourselves. And I think, we can, even though we're a small business, a lot of times we can sort of influence in the rest of the ecosystem and get people, kind of direct people to creators. For example, like brands we work with, there are some bigger brands that sit in our store that spend lots of budget on creators. Now, I can't maybe spend what the creator might need or
But you
want,
get
but we can
residual
tell the
effects of
brand, but
that.
we can
Yeah,
talk to the brand
yeah.
and say, like, these are the guys in our local market. And we've actually done that in a few instances and directed people. So it's a whole ecosystem that I think works together and can work really well in a very honest and direct way that I think is just, it's refreshing, it's new, and it's like changing, it's constantly changing, right? The platforms shift, the way people are monetizing things shift. We're seeing one of the things we've been exploring is the live shopping trend. And is that something we can explore where maybe we're not doing as much traditional e-commerce, but there's this whole thing about our identity that we can sort of attach into a shopping experience, and sort of exploring that. But yeah, I mean, the creator world and the sort of social media side is going to be a huge part of our business going forward.
Yeah. And what do you think at like, even like for with your experience, at the MBA level, and
Yeah.
also just like having, I would say, just an extremely broad perspective when it comes to business, from small business brick and mortar to private
Yeah.
equity and everything in between, right? Do you think this is something that on the social media side that people are realizing on all spectrums, and slowly getting up to the highest level of things?
Yeah, no, I think it absolutely is. I mean, I think there are big examples. I mean, there's, I hate to call it out, but it's like the McDonald's burger example recently, where you're seeing like, here's my lesson from all of that type of stuff is like, social media is like, people can sniff out authenticity in a heartbeat, right? And like, whether it's me or it's a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar, restaurant chain, you got to come with authenticity to everything you're doing, and it's part of the job. You have to do it, and you have to engage in that authentic way, because the second it smells off, like you're caught like instantly. And so I think that's great, because I like to think of myself as a pretty authentic person, and like when I think about the Dray story, I try to weave in like my full life experience and like why I'm doing it into that story, and it resonates really well, and sort of it pulls people in a way. And so it's a way that can be very empowering at any level of business, but you better be damn sure you've got authentic backing behind it, and it doesn't look like some publicity stunt or something you don't believe in, because it'll turn on you very quickly. So I think every business is having to sort of reckon with that and learn lessons about it, and stumble, obviously, like we all stumble on these things. But I think that's where it's like, when you have a business like ours that has an authentic story behind it, you can build a lot off of that.
Yeah, definitely. Lastly, what is Dray? What's the meaning behind Dray, and how did that name come about?
Yeah, I mean, all the credit goes to my wife, who is an amazing. She actually, her career has been in PR and marketing. So she's not an official member of the company, but she's really like a co-founder. And we talked about logo and design for a long time, and we wanted this. Our requirements were, we wanted bold, vibrant, one word, sort of powerful. And we didn't want it to be anything that was like zero proof this, sober that. Like, we wanted it to be its own brand. And so she came up with this. And Dray, so Dray's actually a wagon. And it's, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, which is home to Anheuser-Busch. Ironically, Anheuser-Busch was, their big beer manufacturing plant was about a half mile from my high school. So I stared at it every day when I drove to and from the high school. They would actually park beer, on our high school parking lot. They used it as overflow parking for their beer, like the big delivery trucks. Anyway, but Anheuser-Busch is famous. They have a horse-drawn wagon, the Clydesdales, and it's this old-time wagon that carries beer barrels on it. And so that's a Dray. A Dray is a wagon. And we love this idea of this wagon imagery, being like on the wagon, like sort of means to be sober, to not be drinking. And so we love the wagon imagery, this idea that you're going somewhere, it's empowering, you're jumping on, you're sort of part of this forward momentum. So a Dray is a wagon, and our logo it looks like a piece of citrus. It's actually a half wagon wheel with just a little martini glass in there. But it's fun to play around with, because it sounds like dry. It's got lots of different sort of play in the name, and I think it's just it's a really resonant brand. It's sort of stood out well between the coloring, the logo,
I love
the
the
brand,
orange.
and
The orange is awesome.
and so the only lesson I've learned out of that is, like, whoever you marry is the most important decision in your entire life, and thankfully I made a really good one. Yeah.
Well, Pat, thank you so much for doing this, sitting down today, having this conversation. I think it was extremely insightful, just on this industry as a whole, but also your background, what you're up to with Dray, and wanted to thank you again for doing this, and also hosting us a couple of nights ago in your store, and letting us bring our community in. I think people really enjoyed it, and I think we want to absolutely continue that and do more of that. And I think I personally see a lot of growth to come in this space.
100%. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. The Creators and Founders group is extraordinary. I mean, seeing it firsthand, I've been to a couple events. It's a great thing for the Boston community. So it's amazing what you guys are building. We loved hosting here. We can do lots more with that group for sure. And similar to your group that experienced Dray in person, I would just say you can listen to podcasts and listen to me talk all you want, but just come to our store. Like, you can come to one of our locations. We got people who are here to help you navigate, like if you don't know the products and stuff like that. We've got fun stuff to play around with. So would love to see everybody at an event, or just stop by retail sometime and say hi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pat.
Thanks. Good to see you. Yeah.